Please step out of the first-class cabin. Sir, we don't serve criminals here. That's what First Officer Daniel said calmly, confidently, and loud enough for everyone in first class to hear, before he tore Alexander's boarding pass in half and let the pieces fall to the floor like scraps of paper. He didn't hesitate, didn't whisper, and didn't apologize. He looked straight into Alexander's eyes and added, "Maybe you're used to economy class or prison." Then, the head flight attendant, Sophia, stepped forward, snatched Alexander's wallet from the armrest without permission, held it up high like evidence, and smirked. "Let's security check if this is real." At that moment, Alexander didn't say a word. Not because he couldn't, but because he knew, exactly 45 minutes later, the man they had just humiliated would halt the flight and fire the entire crew. But no one realized it yet. Before we dive deeper into what happened on this flight, I have something I'd like to ask you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, like your city or country. And if this story grabs you, if you believe in standing up against injustice, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more folks hear the truth. And these days, the truth is what matters most. It's 7:15 a.m. at Gate C-17 of Chicago O'Hare Airport. Alexander boarded Flight 2820 with SkyPulse Airlines in jeans and a white shirt. No fuss, no briefcase, no assistance, no Rolex watch, just a black man with a platinum boarding pass, a black leather tote bag, and the quiet confidence that only billionaires have. But to Brian and Sophia, he didn't look like that. He looked like someone sneaking into a seat that wasn't theirs. What they didn't know was that Alexander wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a company worth $4 billion, and he owned 30% of SkyPulse Airlines. His presence wasn't random. He was there on a mission. A silent audit after anonymous Reddit posts exposed racism in SkyPulse's first-class service. This wasn't about revenge. It was about verification. Human-delivered truth. Brian mocked the platinum card Alexander presented. "Where'd you get this Amazon?" Sophia took it from Alexander's hand, turned to the cabin, and said, "Folks, we've got a fake flyer here." Behind her, a couple in row 3 snickered. A man muttered, "They always try to cheat the system." That's when a young man named Andre Carter, 28 years old, sitting in seat 2A, started recording with his phone. "Injustice on SkyPulse Airlines," he whispered and posted it on X. No hashtags, just raw footage. The reaction was instant whispers, sideways glances, tension filling the aisle. Owen Hayes, 33 years old, an ethics consultant, slammed his tray table down. "You're profiling him. It's clear," he said to Brian. Alexander stayed calm, but his mind was elsewhere, 20 years back. At 20, he was flying alone for the first time to pitch his college tech idea to an investor in Dallas, having saved for months, wearing his favorite hoodie and sneakers, and splurging on an upgrade to first class with his limited funds. As he sat down, a middle-aged flight attendant with a bright smile approached and asked loudly enough for the whole cabin to hear, "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Alexander smiled awkwardly, nodded, and handed her his ticket. She studied it like it was fake, then called over another crew member to double-check. No apologies came, just sighs, a shrug, and a comment. "I guess so," That humiliation cut deeper than anything young Alexander had ever felt. He didn't say a word then, but made a promise to himself. One day, he wouldn't just sit in first class. He'd own the airline. That memory, that fire, is why he stood silent now. Not out of weakness, but watchfulness. Back in the cabin, Sophia tossed Alexander's wallet across the aisle. It bounced off a seat and hit the floor. "Security will match it with your fake ID," she snapped. Alexander slowly picked it up, staying calm. "Scan the card," he said. Brian laughed. "We're not scanning fakes." Alexander didn't argue. He pulled out his phone and called his executive assistant, Talia Brooks. "Talia," he said quietly, "start Protocol 3. She replied instantly, "Logging it. Already recording. Are you safe?" "It's all good now," he replied. Sophia turned to the others in the cabin with a forced smile. "We're taking care of the boarding issue. Someone forged a platinum card to sneak into this area." Alexander stood up straighter. "You might want to double-check that story," he said. Owen stood up too. "He's not lying." "I saw the card myself." Brian ignored him, reached out, and snatched Alexander's platinum card from Sophia. He glanced at it, pretended to scan it, then stuffed it in his pocket. "It's not showing in our system," he said. "Just imagine," Owen yelled. "That's theft," Alexander calmly replied. "You're damaging Sky Pulse Airlines in front of all these witnesses." Sophia kicked the torn boarding pass under the seat and said, "Trash belongs with trash." Alexander bent down, picked it up, and handed it to Owen. "Read it," he said. Owen slowly opened it. His voice was clear. "Alexander, Seat 1A, Platinum Class." Sophia's smile vanished. Kyle Vance, the assistant flight attendant, looked worried. "Hold on," he whispered. Sophia Alvarez turned to Andre, who was still recording. "That's enough," she said. "Put the phone down. Let your words be stronger than the video." Alexander didn't move. He didn't flinch, but the temperature in the cabin had changed. The quiet billionaire wasn't silent anymore. Brian didn't blink. "Get him out of here! He's barking. He's not first-class material. He's a fraud, and this plane isn't moving until he's gone." With that, he waved to Kyle Vance, the assistant flight attendant and in-flight security coordinator, who approached nervously and issued the order forcefully. Kyle stepped between Alexander and the aisle and grabbed his arm. "Come on," he barked. "You don't belong here. Try for the luggage." The whole cabin held its breath. The tone had shifted from humiliation to hostility. Alexander stood his ground, not resisting, but not backing down. "Let go," he said, low and steady. But Kyle didn't. Across the aisle, Owen Hayes jumped up from his seat and slammed his tray table, the metal clang echoing through the tense space. "Enough," he growled. "This is wrong, and you know it." Behind them, Andre Carter's phone was still rolling. "You're watching live," he whispered into the lens. "This is injustice in first class." That video would spark chaos later, but right now, it just fueled the fire. Sophia Alvarez rushed forward, positioning herself between Andre and the scene. "No more filming," she said, grabbing his wrist. "Speak up. Talk about it. Don't just record this. Think again." But Andre kept recording. Kyle tightened his grip. Alexander didn't flinch. And then, without warning, his memory shifted. He wasn't 40 anymore. He was just 10, sitting by the window in row 4, flying from Atlanta to Chicago after visiting his grandma. It was his first flight he could remember, something exciting. His mom had dressed him in clean khakis, a blue polo shirt, and a labeled backpack. The airline had upgraded them to first class at the last minute, and he was thrilled. The seats looked like thrones. But as he settled in, an older white flight attendant approached, leaned down, and said gently, but with a sharp edge hidden behind her smile, "Sweetie, are you lost? Is Coach over there?" He blinked at her, unsure how to respond. His mom, tall and proud, reached over and handed the tickets without a word. The woman read them, hesitated, then walked away, whispering to another staff member. No apology, no explanation, just doubt. And even at 10, Alexander understood something terrible. Even when sitting in the right seat, dressed properly, and behaving well, he still didn't seem to belong. Kyle finally loosened his grip. Maybe because of Owen's voice. Maybe because of Sophia's glare. Maybe guilt? Alexander slowly pulled his arm away. "Do you know what this is?" he said to Kyle. "You feel it." Kyle didn't respond, but his face betrayed him. Regret was rising. Alexander picked up his phone again. "Talia," he said softly, "log the physical contact. Verbal incident has escalated." Her voice came back instantly. "Logged." "Company stream is active. All time stamped." Brian was pacing at the front of the cabin like a captain without a map. "This flight is delayed until we deal with him," he shouted. "He's holding everyone up." Sophia joined in from the galley. "This is what happens when we stop enforcing class barriers." She didn't whisper it. She wanted everyone to hear. Owen's voice echoed through the cabin again. "What class barriers? He has a platinum card, a valid boarding pass." "The only barrier is your bias." Alexander stood silently, letting the words sink in, then turned to Andre's camera. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about how quickly people decide I don't belong here." Kyle, still standing awkwardly to the side, looked away. "I was just following Brian," he mumbled. "I didn't know what was true." Alexander turned to face him directly. "But you acted that way," Andre yelled to the back. "They're watching this on X." "The video is spreading," Sophia shot back. "That doesn't matter now. What matters is what we do next." Alexander lifted his phone again. "Talia, please confirm we've reached stage 2 of Protocol 3. "Confirmed," she said. "We're moving to administrative escalation." "Do you want to activate the internal audit visibility?" Alexander paused. "Not yet. Let's give the truth a chance to speak first." Passengers in rows 2 through 5 were fully engaged now. Whispers turned to open comments. A man asked, "What's his name again?" A woman across from him said, "I don't care who he is. This is wrong. And this is where I want to stop and ask you. Are you watching this? What would you do right now if you were in that cabin? Would you speak up, point out the issue, or stay quiet and hope someone else does? Be honest and share your answer in the comments. We read them, one by one. Kyle slowly turned back to Alexander. "Listen," he started to say, but Owen cut him off. "No, don't explain. Just stop," Brian yelled again. "Enough. I'm calling ground control." "He's a threat to the flight." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "I've cleared every TSA scan. I have a verified boarding pass. I have a platinum card. Exactly what threat is this?" "Brian." Sophia interjected. "We don't have to answer that. We're just following procedure." Alexander smiled warmly. "I mean, the same protocol that involves tearing cards, tossing wallets, and pocketing customer cards, right?" Kyle stepped back, clearly shaken. His fingers twitched near the intercom. "I think we should just verify the card," he mumbled. "Yeah, like with the scanner," Sophia hissed. "Don't back down now." Owen stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Alexander. "It's too late. He's done it," Andre whispered. "It's getting worse by the second." Sophia nodded. "Or maybe things are getting clearer." Talia's voice came through again. "Audit visibility is ready." "Say the word." Alexander looked around at the passengers, seeing fear, anger, awakening. "Not yet," he whispered. "Let them dig their own hole." Kyle took a deep breath and turned to Brian. "Maybe we should back off." Brian looked furious. "You want to lose your job over this fake?" Kyle didn't answer, but he didn't move. And for the first time, Alexander saw real hesitation. True doubt. The first crack in the wall. Brian's voice ripped through the tense air like metal. "Fine. If you won't move, prove you deserve to be here. Open your banking app right now." He said it loudly, louder than necessary, as if he wanted the whole first-class cabin to hear. "Let's see if you can afford this seat." Those words were the final push, not physical, but to the dignity. Alexander didn't move, didn't blink, but the insult hit harder than any before. Then, Kyle, confused and defensive, threw Alexander's passport across the cabin. It sailed like a frisbee and landed near a beverage cart. "Go pick it up," he barked, trying to sound tough but sounding hoarse. Passengers gasped. Sofia Alvarez covered her mouth. Andre Carter's camera went up again. "He just threw his passport," he whispered into the lens as if it were trash. "This is spreading fast." But Alexander didn't crumble. His stance was iron solid, his silence louder than any shout. Sophia crossed her arms, turning her attention to a young black woman sitting 2 rows away. Kira Nelson, 22 years old, a journalism student with a shy smile and worried eyes. "Are you two together?" Sophia asked, her voice full of implication. Kira shrank back in her seat. "No," she said softly. "I don't even know him." Sophia smiled. "Sure, but first class is crowded today." That stung. Alexander saw Kira's face fall. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap. And that's when something in him finally ignited. Not from anger, but clarity. He recalled another flight, another insult Alexander at 25. He'd just signed his first $2 million contract. And he splurged on a flight to San Diego for a conference, first class, fully paid, in a black turtleneck and blazer. He felt powerful for the first time, like he belonged in the skies. He felt on top. But as he boarded, the flight attendant looked him over, squinted, and asked if he'd won the lottery. Casual words, polite tone, but the wound was deep. Later, as he sipped soda, she walked by and whispered, "You folks really ruin the cabin these days, don't you?" Kindly. She didn't see how it crushed him. That day, Alexander didn't protest. He took it, sat through it. She thought she was being kind. She didn't see how it crushed him. That day, Alexander didn't protest. She thought she was being kind. She didn't see how it crushed him. That day, Alexander didn't protest, sat through the flight with fire in his gut and steel in his chest, but he never forgot it. And now, on Sky Pulse Airlines, he was enduring similar insults from someone younger, in a neater uniform, but with the same weapon bias disguised as policy. Back in the cabin, Kyle stepped forward again, trying to regain control. "Sir, I'll have to ask you to move forward while we sort this out." Alexander said nothing. Owen Hayes stepped in. "Don't touch him again." "That's assault." Kyle's hands hovered in the air, trembling. "I'm just doing my job." Owen turned to the rest of the cabin. "Are we going to pretend this is normal?" A man in row 4 stood up. "He's not doing anything wrong." A woman next to him added, "He showed his ID twice." They tore it up. The passengers weren't silent anymore. Andre's phone was still buzzing. "We have 12 witnesses," he said to no one in particular. "And video evidence." Sophia crossed her arms tighter. "Passengers aren't allowed to film flight crew. And flight crew aren't allowed to discriminate. Which one do you want to fix first?" Finally, Alexander spoke. "Talia," he said into the phone, "begin the audit visibility quietly." Her voice returned, calm. "Confirmed. Internal leadership now sees the live feed." "Do you want to proceed with escalation?" Alexander's answer was firm. "Give them 5 minutes. Let's see who picks the right side." Kyle's eyes darted worriedly to Sophia. "This isn't right anymore," he mumbled. "It never was," Alexander replied. "You're just ignoring the weight of your choices." At that moment, Brian stepped forward and shoved Alexander's chest. "That's it," he spat. "You're being detained for suspected fraud." Those words were harsh, but the passengers reacted first. Owen physically blocked Brian's next move. "It's over," he said firmly. "It's over." The aisle in the cabin became a barrier. The aisle in the cabin became a barrier. Kira was now standing, clearly shaking but determined. "You don't know who he is," she said too. Kira was now standing, clearly shaking but determined. "You don't know who he is," she said to Sophia. "And that's the problem." Alexander slowly turned to the cabin. "I told you, you're destroying your own airline." Kyle looked shocked. "Sophia told us he faked his passport. We believed her." Alexander looked straight at him. "And what did you believe when you threw my passport like trash?" Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. Shame was written on his face like a confession. Now the passengers were rising. Half the cabin, some whispering, others filming. But the crew's silence said it all. Sophia turned to Brian. "Say something." But he couldn't. Alexander raised his phone again. "Talia, please confirm. I still own 30% of Sky Pulse Airlines. Affirmative." and now the board can see what's happening in real time. Sophia's mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. Brian looked like a man trying to remember how to breathe. Alexander's voice was still calm, but now steely. My name is Alexander. I'm the CEO of Nexus Dynamics and a shareholder in this airline. I've been silent long enough, but this ends here. Owen turned to the rest of the cabin. Did you hear that? He owns 30% of the airline. They harassed their own boss. A stunned silence fell. One person whispered, "Oh my goodness." Another said, "It's over for them." Andre lowered his phone. I knew he looked familiar. Familiar. And now, let me ask you directly. If you were on that flight, if you'd witnessed everything from the past slights to the passport throw and the demand for proof of wealth, what would you do? Would you speak up, film it, or stay silent? Would you stand with Alexander or let him stand alone? Let us know in the comments, because what you say now says everything about the world we want to live in. Alexander turned back to Brian, Sophia, and Kyle. 3 uniforms, 3 faces, all frozen in different stages of collapse. This flight is suspended, he said, not because of me, but because of your decisions. Then he looked toward the cockpit and said something no one expected. All of you should sit down. The next 10 minutes will decide your futures. Daniel had clearly reached his limit. His face was flushed, eyes wild with a mix of panic and defiance. He grabbed the cabin phone and shouted, "This is First Officer Keller. Initiate security removal protocol. Passenger in seat 1A is non-compliant, verbally hostile, and suspected of identity fraud." Then, he slammed it down and pointed straight at Kyle Vance. "Get him out now." Sophia stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding as if justice had been served. But Kyle didn't move right away. He looked at Alexander, then at the dozen passengers standing or staring with growing disgust. "Brian," he said, voice uncertain and shaky. "Maybe we should slow down." "No," Brian shouted. "This ends now." "Drag him out or you're out too." That's when Kyle snapped. His duty overrode his fear, and he lunged at Alexander, grabbing his forearm again, harder than before, and started pulling him toward the front of the cabin. "Get up," he said through gritted teeth. "Let's go." Alexander stood firm. "If he lays another finger on me," he warned, "and Sky Pulse will bleed from the inside out." But Kyle didn't stop. He yanked. Alexander's shoulder jerked. And that was it. The passengers moved. No one waited for permission. Owen Hayes stepped forward, planting his feet in the aisle in front of Kyle. "No, he's not going anywhere." A woman in row 4 joined him, spreading her arms. "This isn't happening." "Not today." Then, Andre stood up. "You're dragging a black executive off his own flight. Think about what you're doing." Sofia Alvarez stepped between Kyle and Alexander, her eyes blazing. "You want to escalate? Do it with words, not hands." Sofia yelled from behind, "Move aside. You're interfering with a federal flight crew member." But no one budged. Instead, they formed a human wall. Passengers shoulder to shoulder in the narrow aisle, standing between Kyle and Alexander like guardians protecting a leader. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the cabin itself had turned against the crew. Kyle's hands dropped. He stared at his fingers as if they no longer belonged to him. "Brian," he mumbled. "They're blocking the aisle." Brian, from the front, almost screamed, "Push through. Do your damn job." Alexander didn't move. He just turned to Kyle and said one word, "Voice even and low choose," and Kyle froze behind them. Andre shouted the videos at 20,000 views. People are watching this right now. Sophia lost control and tried a different tactic. She turned to Kira Nelson, still seated, and hissed, "You think they're filming to protect you? You think the world cares about you?" Kira slowly rose, chest out. "I don't care if they do," she said, voice hoarse but clear. "But I won't sit down while you tear people apart." Brian lunged forward again, but Alexander raised his phone. "Talia," he said, "we're at the escalation threshold." "Confirm with the company." Her voice rang out immediately, calm and direct. "Confirmed. We've hit the 45-minute violation window. Lawyers and the board have eyes on it. He's authorized." Alexander stepped forward and looked Brian in the eye. "Do you know what you've done?" Brian scoffed. "You think they'll side with you? You lied your way onto this flight." Alexander responded with quiet strength. "I built the plane you're standing on, the company you offended me with. I own 30% of it. Your airline doesn't belong to you. It belongs to accountability. And it's coming now." Kyle backed away. He completely loosened his hold. His shoulders slumped. Then, like a man shedding his uniform, he whispered, "He didn't fake anything." I think we all knew the moment he boarded. Sophia looked betrayed. "Kyle, what are you doing?" But Kyle didn't answer her. He turned back and looked at the passengers, into their eyes, their phones, their courage, and said, "This isn't policy. This is rotten pride." A wave of murmurs spread through the cabin. And now I want to ask you, watching this, if you were Kyle, standing in that aisle, pressured by your boss but surrounded by truth, what would you do? Would you follow orders to keep your job? Or would you stop and listen to your conscience, even if it means consequences? Be honest and let us know in the comments, because the world won't change until ordinary people make extraordinary choices. Back in the cabin, Andre lowered his phone, stepped beside Alexander, and said, "Now you have backup." Alexander nodded at him. Sophia, still between Kyle and Alexander, turned to Alexander and said, "This isn't just a test flight, is it?" Alexander's voice was gentle. It was never just a test. It was a calculation. Sophia tried one last command. "We are the airline crew. You can't overrule us." Owen turned to her. "We're doing that right now, and so is your boss." At that moment, Kyle turned to the galley, removed his security badge, and dropped it in the trash. "I'm done with this." Brian's voice choked coward, but no one heard him amid the passengers. Now they were clapping. Talia's voice rang out Alexander. "The company is alert. PR is waiting." "Lawyers have approved immediate action." Alexander nodded. "Then let's begin." Alexander slowly walked forward, the aisle now clear, passengers silent, not from fear, but awe. The man they'd seen insulted, doubted, grabbed, and mocked stood there, calm, composed, resolute. He reached into his black tote bag, pulled out a neatly folded navy jacket, and slipped it over his white shirt in one smooth motion. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor. And as he looked up, his voice steady. "My name," he said clearly, "is Alexander. I'm the CEO of Nexus Dynamics, and as of this morning, I still hold 30% ownership in SkyPulse Airlines." Those words echoed through the cabin like thunder. Sophia's mouth fell open, but she said nothing. Brian stepped back as if pushed by the truth. Kyle slumped into an empty seat, head in his hands. Effective immediately, Alexander continued. First Officer Daniel, Head Flight Attendant Sophia, and Security Coordinator Kyle Vance. The two of you are relieved of all duties and terminated permanently from SkyPulse operations. He looked straight at Sophia. Brian, you are also permanently banned from flying on any SkyPulse route, commercial or private. For cause. The silence was deafening. No whispers, no coughs. Only a woman in the back let out a whispered, "Oh my goodness." Brian rushed forward, face red, voice choking. "You can't fire me. I've worked for this company 16 years. Alexander didn't flinch. 16 years. And you still think power lets you demean passengers, tear tickets, steal IDs, grab arms." He glanced back, just enough for every camera to catch. "You're not fired for a mistake. You're fired for choices. And today, the consequences have caught up." Sophia stepped forward, trembling with rage. "This is an abuse of power. You set this up. You tricked us." Alexander slowly turned to her. "I gave you a chance to do your job. You chose something else." Owen Hayes added from behind. "You treated him like a threat before you even looked at his name." Sophia Alvarez nodded. "And you made Kira feel small just for sitting in the seat she paid for." Kira, now standing quietly, wiped tears from her cheek. "I didn't think anyone would stand up for people like me, but this changed something in me." Sophia's hands shook at her sides. Then suddenly, the dam broke, her voice hoarse. "You want the truth?" she said loudly, eyes scanning the cabin. 7 official complaints about Brian in the last year. All for bias, all for racism. The passengers inhaled sharply. Kyle looked up. "Wait, what?" Sophia laughed bitterly. "I shredded them." We all knew the company would protect him. I didn't think any of them mattered. I didn't think he mattered. That was the moment the last thread snapped. Kyle stood up. "You knew you hid those." Sophia. No answer, but the silence spoke volumes. Talia's voice came through Alexander's earpiece. "Alexander, the board confirms full authority on site. Terminations are approved immediately. Sophia's confession is now in the live feed archive." Alexander nodded. "Record it. Store it under personnel violations." He looked at Sophia once more. "You not only failed the audit, you also disappointed the people you swore to serve." Then, turning to the passengers, he added, "And for that, I apologize. You've trusted this airline, and this airline has forgotten what that really means." Andre Carter stepped forward, put his phone down. "That's it now." Andre Carter stepped forward, putting his phone down. "That's it. We saw it all. Sophia just admitted we'll make sure this doesn't fade away. Justice was served in this cabin today because people stood up when it counted. Alexander turned to Kyle. "Mr. Vance?" he said. Voice not cold, but firm. "Your silence made it worse. You had a choice, but hesitated. I hope one day you understand what courage is before it's too late." Kyle nodded, clearly anguished. "I agree. Now I do." Talia chimed in again. "Final confirmation. All 3 terminations processed. PR is preparing an immediate statement. Cabin feed will remain active until the audit review is complete." Alexander took a breath and looked around the cabin. "If anyone here wants to submit a written or verbal statement or complaint, please stay seated after landing. The legal and media teams will meet us at the jet bridge." The passengers nodded. A few clapped quietly. Not for show, but in quiet solidarity and truth. And now I ask you, as you're watching this video, wherever you are, have you ever had to make yourself smaller just to avoid being seen as a threat? Have you ever been told you don't belong where you paid to be? If so, what does justice look like to you? Is it someone yelling back, or just standing tall when no one else does? Let me know in the comments, because what we define as justice today could be someone else's reality tomorrow. Sophia turned away, shoulders slumped. Brian sat down, stunned like a man watching his life wall crumble in real time. Kyle leaned forward, elbows on his knees, saying nothing. The 3 of them, so vocal just minutes ago, now silent. No shouts, just peace. Alexander adjusted his jacket. "We're not done yet." Sky Pulse will be held accountable for what happened here, and you 3 will never get the chance to do this to any passenger again. With that, he turned and walked back to seat 1A. Not as the test subject, not as the victim, but as the man who turned a cabin into a courtroom and delivered the verdict himself. Alexander remained at the front of the cabin, hands clasped in front of him, jacket draped over his shoulders as he addressed not just the passengers, but the very soul of Sky Pulse. This flight needs more than just to land. It has to mean something. He glanced back slightly, facing the remaining crew and all the passengers who witnessed the collapse and rebirth of accountability in real time. Effective immediately, Sky Pulse Airlines will roll out a company-wide initiative called Sky Pulse Unity. It will include mandatory diversity and dignity training for all ground and flight staff, anonymous complaint safeguards with third-party oversight, and a full cultural environment audit every 6 months across all operations. Talia's voice gently confirmed. "The board just approved the initial rollout. Your announcement is recorded." PR is ready to send an external notice post-flight. Alexander nodded once, then continued to the cabin. An internal leadership meeting will be held tonight with a full review of current policies by the executive team. We will revise hiring protocols, accountability measures, and escalation procedures. A public apology on the media will be issued within 48 hours. No denials, no excuses. There's silence at first, then scattered applause, and finally a wave of support rising from the passengers who've been quiet until now, but suddenly realize they're not just flying. They're witnessing real change. Sophia Alvarez speaks up first. "That's how you lead." Not with orders, but with character. Owen adds, "This airline might finally become one we can trust." Even Andre puts his phone down. He said you're not just standing up for yourself, You've changed the whole cabin for everyone." But the speech doesn't last long. As soon as Alexander starts heading back to seat 1A, Talia's voice comes through the headset. It's clearer now. "We've uncovered something." The audit flags wiped out entries linked to Sophia's employee login. She tried to bypass the compliance filters in the last internal audit. Alexander tenses up when Talia replies, 2 months ago. She marked all the biased passenger reports as resolved without any real checks, including complaints against Brian Keller and even her own. The full report is scheduled to go to the company next week. Checked Alexander's voice drops to a low, serious tone. She tried to fake that audit. Talia confirms, yes, that's what she was hiding. He slowly turns back. There's one more thing the passengers deserve to know. Ms. Price didn't just mishandle complaints. She altered them. A wave of shock and whispers spreads through the cabin. Kyle sits up straight. She did what? Sophia looks stunned. Talia confirms over the speaker. The reports were blocked. We're keeping the raw complaints and we'll share them with federal compliance folks. An internal ethics review is underway. Alexander steps forward again. Yet, the authority in his voice is undeniable. This isn't about one person's fault. It's about the system's silence. But that silence is over. Every manager who approved those audits without reading them will be held accountable. Every facility where patterns show up will get retraining, and every voice that was ignored before will now be heard. Owen nods. You're setting a standard for the whole industry. Kira, still standing tall by her seat, quietly adds, You're giving folks like me something we've never had before, a reason to believe. Alexander looks her in the eye and nods. That's the point. It starts right here with all of us in this cabin. Not about public relations, it's about responsibility, mine included. And now, the sky shakes. He steps back to the front, pausing just once to glance at Sophia, who now looks empty instead of angry. You didn't just fake records. Sophia, you tried to protect a culture that's harmful to the very people we're supposed to serve. And that ends today. Passengers start standing up, not in panic, but in support. No cheers, no shouts, just steady nods, respectful agreement, and quiet solidarity from strangers who've become allies in this moment beyond boarding and seats. Talia's voice is warm again. The board says they're behind you. Alexander. They've given full access. Legal issues are locked down, and the press is waiting for your official statement. Alexander lets out a slow breath. Tell them this. The sky we fly in should reflect the dignity of the people inside it. And when that dignity is harmed, responsibility must take off first. This isn't the end of a flight. It's the start of a new era. Then, without waiting for applause or confirmation, Alexander returns to his seat 1A and sits down with the calm of a man who's weathered the storm and still stands strong. Because real power isn't about who controls the chaos in the moment. It's about who rebuilds the system once the dust settles. By the time the cabin door finally opens, what happened on Sky Pulse Flight 2820 isn't just a company audit anymore. It's become a national turning point. The consequences were immediate. Daniel, Sophia, and Kyle Vance weren't just fired. They were flagged by the FAA for official investigations into crew abuse of power and passenger misconduct. Andre's recording footage spread across terminals and inboxes within hours. not through hashtags or trends, but through real people, hitting send with shaky hands and heartfelt subject lines. This is why we speak up. Passengers gave verbal statements to the SkyPulse officials waiting at the jet bridge. Owen Hayes personally submitted a timeline of events along with witness accounts. Kira Nelson, still holding her boarding pass like a badge of proof, filed an official complaint not for herself, but for every time someone like her sits in first class and feels like a problem instead of a person. Alexander didn't talk to the press outside. He didn't need to. The whole cabin heard everything that needed saying. In the weeks that followed, SkyPulse Airlines rolled out every part of the SkyPulse Unity initiative. Mandatory training on diversity and dignity was put in place at 114 airports. Bias audits were made public, and Alexander personally oversaw the internal ethics restructuring that removed over 24 managers who let discrimination slide. When Forbes asked if this challenge changed his leadership style, Alexander replied, "No, it confirmed it." You don't fight bias from the boardroom. You face it right where it lives, quietly and often in everyday life. The legacy of that day isn't power, it's clarity. Alexander didn't just expose a problem. He left a structure that makes hiding problems harder, but the story isn't over yet. Not quite. Just 3 weeks after the incident, a retired SkyPulse regional supervisor named Walter Henley reached out to the company with a private message. His voice, aged but firm, appeared in an internal memo on a company-wide ethics forum. "I protected Daniel for years. He says he was charming. He smiled in meetings, but I saw the reports. I saw what Sophia swept under the rug, and I said nothing. I chose convenience over conscience. If this really is a new SkyPulse, let my silence be the last one." That's the final turn, not of action, but of true accountability. Bias isn't just in the air. It's institutional, and only through confessions can the real cleanup begin. 9 months later, SkyPulse Airlines was flying differently, not because Alexander said so, but because the change came from within. Every audit report is now independently verified by a third-party board. Every complaint is documented and tracked, with results shared in quarterly ethics updates. Crew diversity increased, passenger satisfaction soared, and for the first time in years, there were no reports of racial incidents in premium cabins. But Alexander didn't stop there. At a quiet ceremony in Chicago, he launched the SkyPulse Equity Scholarship, a fund to support young people of color entering the aviation industry with full scholarships for training, education, and leadership development. Kira Nelson, the young journalism student from Seat 4C, was the first to receive it. As Alexander handed her the certificate, she didn't cry. She stood taller. "I won't just write about this," she said. "I'll change it. And now, I want to speak directly to you, wherever you're watching this. Whether you're on a bus or in bed, whether you've lived this story or fear it might be yours someday. Have you ever walked into a room and felt unwelcome before saying a word? Have you ever walked into a room and felt unwelcome before saying a word? Not for what you've done, but for how you look. If you have, know this silence isn't your only choice anymore. Speak up, stand tall, and push back. Because what Alexander did that day wasn't magic. It was strength built from years of swallowing disrespect and choosing to act wisely instead of just yelling. You don't need to be a billionaire to make a difference. You just need the courage for that first step. So, give it a like if this story touched you. Share it if you know someone who feels invisible. And subscribe if you believe stories like this shouldn't just be told, they should be remembered. Because justice doesn't come from the clouds. Sometimes it takes off right from seat 1A.